Welcome back to the Hope Show. My name is Julie, and today I have with me Danielle.
Hello.
Angel.
Hi.
And Casey.
Hi.
And last time we talked about naturalistic teaching, compliance training, and things like that. So we want to go a little bit deeper today and talk about the types of therapy goals that we use in ABA and how those are socially significant, the way in which we do them without having more of a compliance training, and how we do it in a naturalistic way, and just kind of just all the aspects of that. Mm-hmm. So first, I think it's really important to talk really about what ABA is. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you want to, Danielle?
Yeah, so ABA is a science devoted to analyzing behavior and changing socially significant behavior in a meaningful way. So I think when we talk today about the trifecta that we kind of talk about a lot and what we target, that's really going to hit on socially significant behaviors, teaching it in a naturalistic way.
So one of the things when we think about is April and Autism Awareness, Autism Acceptance Month kind of shifting. It's kind of shifting from awareness to acceptance. And I think the challenge in the community of it is balancing the acceptance of differences, which we do, the neurological differences and things like that. But it kind of goes, what we focus on as clinicians is when those differences start to impact their lives, create anxiety, have breakdown in their relationships, and work and all of those things that are really important and provide a quality of life. It's when that anxiety takes hold and then starts to just affect them negatively. So as clinicians, our job really is to help those individuals with those pieces that are, really affecting the skills they need to help so they don't have to have that anxiety. So increase those, specifically the social emotional skills. So when we talk about the trifecta of joint attention, social communication, and social cognition, we're going to talk about those three kind of in tandem today to help really understand when you are struggling with those specifically, how that produces anxiety and ways in which it's being trained or taught, and how that really starts to become actually more anxiety producing in that way.
And I think, in the past, things that I've done as far as training eye contact, there's nothing after the eye contact happens. So, as far as autistic adults talking about the anxiety and almost pain that is felt by having to sustain eye contact with someone when they're communicating, at that point, it's almost like maintaining eye contact for eye contact's sake, rather than shifting to someone for more information after. And that's something I think is particularly important with what we're doing when we write treatment plan goals and in our therapy, is that we're not reinforcing for the shift only, we're also reinforcing the meaning behind the shift. So what are you looking for?
So I think we need to kind of talk maybe about what joint attention is, because I think that there's a misunderstanding really in, the ABA community and, things like that about, everyone's goal is joint attention, and that, sharing in that joint stimulus or being able to read other people, things like that. And, we all have maybe grown up with either a parent or someone who's like, look at me when I'm talking to you, and for that person on the receiving end, when the child isn't looking at you, you think that they are ignoring you, you think they're being defiant, but really what it's about in our humanness is that we feel like we're not on the same page. And that shift for information or that eye contact is really a signal to our brains, really, that you're understanding, we're on the same page, that kind of thing. So I think everyone's goal is joint attention, but what happens when you train eye contact without the aspect of it being for communication, that's when we start to see the trouble, right? So, I don't know, thinking about joint attention is really, I don't call it like the triangle.
Yeah.
So if I'm looking at that plant and I look to Casey,
Yep.
I look to see Casey looks at me, Casey looks back at the plant, and we both have this appraisal, and I'm getting appraisal of Casey's face and what Casey thinks of the plant, and she understands that we're both looking. And if I look to it and Casey's just staring at me, and she's not shifting back from the plant back to me as we're talking about the plant, then I'm going to be like, oh, I need to direct her over here because I feel like she's missing something, because she can't just look to me, and vice versa. If she was just looking at the plant, right, then I feel like she's not understanding what I have to say about the plant. So understanding that it's the shift that we're really looking for. We're not really looking for eye contact for
Right.
the sake of eye contact. I'm looking to see, are we actually on the same page? Are you seeing what I'm seeing? Do you understand what I'm
Yes.
I'm,
It's not about the shift. It's about why you're shifting and making sure that you and your partner are both shifting to each other for the same reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like if we are talking about socially significant behaviors, which are behaviors that can impact the quality of life, that can impact the quality of life hugely. That's a word. Because when you're doing that as a baby, it's such a foundational skill for communication later. And communication can be an area of need. Not speech, but communication, which then can impact speech. So Casey, I think you could probably speak a little bit further on that, but that is, as I said, just a really foundational skill that we have to look at when we're looking at any type of treatment or areas of need or anything like that. So,
And I think that, kind of what you said, Angel, about the eye contact and training that. And I think that the anxiety that comes with it. So we're kind of really shooting ourselves in the foot because we're not really helping by forcing that. And I think the autistic community, that's what they're saying really about ABA, when we're forcing the issue and causing that kind of stress, and how while it's still a socially significant skill, and you want to understand another person, they want to understand another person in their relationships. So how do we do that in a very naturalistic way without having to force the issue? And
pardon. It just brings me back to look at me when I'm talking to you. We don't want to do that. And essentially, if, their therapist, their ABA, RBT, ABA therapist, or whoever is saying, look at me when I'm providing this therapy to you, that's really no different than how we felt as a kid when we were being reprimanded or whatever, and our parents forced us to look. Because you don't know why necessarily, and then it's anxiety ridden to look at someone and not know why you have to stare or maintain that.
Yeah.
Right. So going a little bit further into, so joint attention. Okay, so you have to have this shift. And then the why we're shifting.
Yes.
So the why is the most important part, because then it's just eye contact for the sake of eye contact. So the why. So the why is nonverbal communication. We only look to be able to read your face. Now, I could look at the plant and Casey could tell me, and I could auditorily hear, she's like, oh, it's really green and very spring-like or something like that. And I can hear her and I can hear her appraisal of it, but there's something missing between us.
Yeah.
There really is. And maybe that can't be objectively, that's objectively defined, but there is a something to where if she said something like, yeah, it's so pretty. And, I'm like, wait a minute, her tone of voice, and she's maybe like rolling her eyes like, yeah, it's so pretty. Okay. Then there's a disconnect from what her words are saying, versus her tone of voice versus her facial expression, and so if I wasn't looking, I could miss all of that. And that's kind of the why. And then that goes into then social cognition, which is if she said, if I was looking at her and she was like, so springy, okay, or something like that, then her face tells me a little bit more. So social cognition is really about the meaning of her facial expression. And if her facial expression is saying, I don't really like it, I don't think it's pretty at all, or something like that, then I'm going to be able to, do something more in my communication to be like, you don't like it? It's like a boxwood, okay? And I'd be able to, get us back on the same page, even if we don't agree about it, we still can be on the same. But if I'm only looking at the plant and not Casey to see, wait, that's not matching, then I'm missing. And then there could be a breakdown in our relationship. Casey could feel like, I really don't care what she thinks of it. Julie just likes it her way. Or something like that. So it's that the trifecta really is being the joint attention. I shift. Then your facial expression tells me something, or your gaze shift tells me we're on the same page. And then what does that mean? And then I still have to interpret that.
Yes.
So the interpretation piece is really critical in terms of getting your perspective and being on the same page. And then what do I do in response? So I just kind of wanted to find the three really areas that we write our goals so heavily on, because that is, one of the main criteria for the DSM when you're diagnosing ASD. It is nonverbal communication. It is that social emotional reciprocity, and it is maintaining relationships. So you can't do that if you're missing half of it. So anyway, so I think that I wanted to kind of share all of that before we go forward and talk a little bit more about just the social communication aspect. So you guys want to talk about facial expression and prosody and all of that?
Yeah. I think, Danielle, you kind of mentioned it too with communication. I think often the first thought is how people are saying it or what they're saying, which it is so important. But studies show that in our culture, that only 7% of the meaning is in the actual words we're saying. Everything else, 93%, is in the other pieces. It is in our tone. It is in our facial expression and our body language and things like that. So the meaning is really, really heavy in that nonverbal piece. So if we're not paying attention to that, then we're losing the purpose of communication completely. As a speech pathologist, that is how we're trained. We're trained to look at all aspects of communication and really identify and look at more of that pragmatic piece and the nonverbal piece. But I do feel like it's often missed to look at that and the importance of it.
Well, you can show, the progress takes longer.
Yep.
But you can, if I can get you, and a lot of times, our the parents that come to us, the parents of our clients, a lot of the time, if their child, is nonverbal, nonvocal, whatever you would like to call that, then I just want my child to talk. But really, yes, that's what we see in our culture is if you can, talk to me, then that means something. But you really want your child to communicate with you.
Right.
And talking is a piece of that, and that outwardly shows that and maybe shows understanding or clarification, but going to the heart of that relationship, of communicating, and really, I can get your child to say things. I can do that. We can do that in ABA. Yes. We can do that in speech. I can get them to say anything. But why? If there's no meaning, if there's no relationship behind it, if it becomes stressful for them, because they can't say that, whether there be co-occurring things like apraxia, things that I cannot say these things. That doesn't mean they can't be strong communicators. That, the language piece, and that's not even in the DSM, that language is a deficit at which you diagnose ASD. It's a co-occurring thing, but it isn't. It is the nonverbal. It's the social emotional. That's where autism gets defined. So I think I like that with the 93%. I think about, I always talk about in training class the emojis, and texting. And when we text each other back in the day when it was only text because it took so long, there wasn't emojis, that we missed so much when it was just the words. When it could be taken wrong. or I say the people who are the all caps people, you know who you are. And, and then it's like, is she yelling at me? Is she upset? Is she just excited? But the emojis gave us a facial expression, to be able to say, oh, she's just being sarcastic, or, oh, she's laughing. So then we have a little bit of, and depending on our relationship, that provides the context, that provides the history, which is all part of communication. So if I didn't know Angel and she texted me in all caps, I would be like, I don't know what this person is saying. But now that I know Angel and I would know that she's really excited about something,
Yes.
And I would be able to understand that because of our relationship, not necessarily what you're saying to me,
Yes.
or what you're communicating. So all of that becomes this big package, and the whole heart of it is relationships, and how you maintain, how you initiate, all of those things are so critical. And it's what, all of our clients, really ask for. I want a friend. I want a spouse. I want a significant other. I just want my classmate. I don't want to be bullied in my class. I want to belong. And this is kind of the thing that, while it's the most stressful for them too, it is the thing that is socially significant. And we've defined that as a culture, that you look to somebody, you check with somebody, you clarify with somebody, and it all comes from that joint attention and reading a situation and understanding what that situation means.
Yeah. I think that, going off of meaningful, another part of ABA is generalization. I said this last time, we don't have a generalization problem because we are teaching the meaning of the skill rather than just doing the skill for the sake of doing it. We're actually teaching that meaning behind it, showing them the value of what we're teaching. So therefore, we don't have to go in a ton of different settings with a ton of different people. It just happens.
Yes.
It's generalized because of the way we're teaching.
Why do you shift?
Yes.
And then what do you look for? Do you recognize it? And then how do you read it? It's not just about engaging in the shift.
Right.
It's everything that happens after. I do an exercise in training, because you saying training class made me think of this. And I have people pair up, and they do get to know each other, but I want you both to not to ever look at each other. And it's right when I have the 93.7, like you were discussing. I have it on a slide, and I have, this is 93% of communication, this is 7. And I make it go on for an uncomfortable amount of time. And without fail, 100% of people feel incredibly anxious and uncomfortable doing it, because they're actually not getting 93% of of information that they're used to having when they're getting to know someone like that.
Sorry to interrupt you, Angel. I remember when the masks, were really, like, everybody was wearing masks at the beginning of the pandemic, and we had our first training class with people full of people with masks.
Yes.
And I was like, I think I know it's like, I was feeling really, really anxious for something. I mean, you feel nervous when you're teaching anyway.
Of course.
But when you're teaching, you are looking for feedback from whoever you're teaching, right? Every time you're looking for your head nods, you're looking for smiles or looks of confusion. You're looking for that to kind of guide you in how you're teaching. And everybody had masks on. I had no idea what anybody was thinking. And I felt really nervous. I was like, I really feel like I can't look at you.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what any of you are thinking. And so that really kind of gave me some insights.
Yes, which would be anxiety producing.
Yeah, it was.
I remember that now.
I do
forgotten
too.
about it because I think it was so stressful. But I remember getting that feedback, or even in interviews, still.
Yeah.
I can't tell. Are you following me? Are you with me? I need that so much, and it is stressful for me. I don't know about the other person, but if I can't read you, then I can't connect. And I think that it's even, I've said after interviews, like I can't wait to see what they're like without a mask, because I don't feel like I know that person. Yeah. So that's a really, really cool, way to think about the stress that it caused, and probably a lot of, children and people across this country and around the world, really. But I think that, as we go further in talking about the compliance-based aspect and the teaching of that, and how we can kind of challenge others to, how to think about their goals and their writing goals. If you're out there as an ABA provider, and how do you balance that, teaching that skill? And I think that we do that really well in that we're giving them opportunities. You don't ever have to look, and it's amazing. Having the opportunity and building that relationship and building that social emotional reciprocity almost first, then it is natural for them to look. And they begin to look, and they become confident in their looking. And then you see the anxiety go. I mean, they're just not as anxious
100%
people anymore. And I think it's, and the confidence that you see as they start to, have those interactions and initiate those interactions, that's my favorite part of my job is to be able to see that.
Yes.
And you see that go hand in hand. Our data shows that we are able to see that once they have that, but they've never been forced to do it. So it can be done. It really can be done. And how, the implication for that, for ABA reform, to listen to the community, the autistic community who's saying, we don't like it, it's traumatic, to have forced eye contact.
Yes.
And so that's not even necessary.
As we're talking, it makes me think about the assessment and the part of the assessment where we are looking at joint attention. And typically in that part, we will get out a book that has silly pictures in it. And the instructions that I or the BCBA give to the client at that time is just, we're going to look at this book together. And it just has silly pictures in it. And almost undoubtedly, almost 100% of the time, the response, regardless of the background of the client, is just to label something in the picture. Either label what's silly about it, or really it's usually labeling.
State the facts.
Yes.
State the facts. Mm-hmm.
There's a turtle. And that's it. When really there's so much more to that. So while I recognize that in that assessment process, it's their first time being in there, they don't know me, so there is a lot of anxiety already. I just kind of sit back and wait to see if I can get that joint attention. If we can have a shared experience about this silly picture. And typically, when the shift does come, it's just to get appraisal for what they said. So a turtle, I'm not responding. And then they shift a turtle, waiting for me to say, yeah, it is a turtle. When really I'm looking more for like, isn't this crazy? The turtle's winning the race.
Yeah.
And that reminds me so much of, what I've done previously. In the past, we regularly kind of trained or taught clients, kids, to label facial expression pictures as emotion. This facial expression is sad. This one is angry. And then sometimes as part of the generalization process, we would have different pictures of sad, angry faces. And then we would make the faces with the hope that that would then generalize into everyday life. But really, it's just memorizing the labels.
Right. Yeah. And that is why joint attention is so important, because it is a behavioral cusp. So without it, you cannot actually learn different facial expressions. You can't generalize it because you're not shifting to other people's faces enough to learn enough about it for it to actually cusp into. Now, I was looking to mom when I was uncertain. When I did that, I learned about different tones of voice. I learned about different facial expressions. You're okay, and giving that prosody that makes them feel okay. Then as a baby, you start to value that, those experiences, and you start to shift for experience sharing. This is a silly picture, Mom, isn't it? They don't even have to talk. You can, a 10-month-old will do that and shift to
show you their picture, like what I made, and I'm looking for I'm looking for your appraisal, but it's not appraisal, am I right or wrong? It's like, actually, what do you think about it?
Yes.
And I think those labels come back to when we just label it, or if we just labeled the example of the folding, having your arms crossed. Okay. And if I can teach that and I can train it, I can train you. What does this mean? And that usually, that means someone's angry if they have a face like this, and their arms are crossed. But that isn't, there's so many nuances with people, and you could just be a person who's cold all the time.
Yeah.
Because we've had that happen with clients before, to where it's like, are you mad? Are you mad? And you see this anxiety go up. And it's like, no, but your arms are crossed, and and I have memorized that thing, but really it's like, oh no, I'm so sorry. I had no idea what was upsetting you, why you were escalating, why you were having some anxiety, when it was really just a matter of like, I'm just actually really cold, or, whatever this would mean for somebody. But if I trained in a series of pictures, that this body language means, angry or whatever, or if I trained that it was cold and someone's really angry and you're just carrying on and don't realize that Casey's really, really mad at me right now, and I don't have that repair. And it goes back to the meaning. And if I read the expression, and I have to understand that meaning, because you can't train repair.
No, and I think that's what is so crucial. Let's say they were trained that that's angry, and you are angry. Then what? What do I do? What if it was just cold? Repair, recognizing someone's cold. So in context and your history with the person and all of that, recognizing that you're cold, offering them a jacket. Offering to turn the heat up and things like that. That's the messy piece. That's the meaning behind the different types of things that we're trying to teach. So
right. And then we experience share with that, because if you were even sitting there cold, we do that, weird human stuff where we make this small talk, or we just like make a statement like, it's cold in here, but we're not going like, it's cold in here, I want a response from you, Casey. We just say like, just narrate things all the time. And if I was just like, oh, it is cold in here, and you're like, yeah, it is, I don't understand, then we actually come together, even though it is small talk, but we have this shared experience together. And that's really kind of really the point. There might be a repair that I could do, but maybe you're just like, yeah, I'm always cold. Then there is nothing for me to do. Because if I came and gave you a blanket and you were like, oh, it's okay, I'm always cold, then that would be, so there's so many messy, you cannot train every solution to every, I wouldn't even call it a problem, every interaction. And so it's about that experience. And I think that when we do the weighting in the assessment, and our job is to be completely present while we wait that out, make sure they don't get too anxious to where we lose them, or it gets, unsafe for them or adversive for them. But we also don't jump in and correct. We let it sit and let you think. And then when they do shift, then there can be a natural reinforcement of like, oh, you want to know what I think? And that is like, wait a minute, when I shifted, she had like all of a sudden started smiling, and we had this like moment. I mean, that's the ultimate thing, is it becomes intrinsic, as opposed to you. Now look at me, see what I think, blah, 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 that's not necessarily going to generalize.
Yeah, that's when you have the generalization problem, because that meaning is not there. Yep, for sure.
Yeah. So I think that we kind of covered the joint attention aspect, social communication, social cognition, and the importance really of all three. But the importance of really understanding that the natural way at which we all learn, and why we're looking, why are we seeking to communicate, why do we need to understand? Because understanding what you mean by that means I'm holding up my end of the relationship, so that I can repair and we can keep a relationship going.
Yes.
And I think that if we let that drop, then that starts to affect quality of life. So that is why this is social. So coming back to social significance, why in ABA, that is the purpose of ABA, and the purpose of that is to generalize naturally. So we have to do things and look at those practices to kind of push ourselves a little bit more and beyond training. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.